Chief Constable, members of the media, and the public, and those joining us online for this meeting in public of the Northern Ireland Policing Board, you're all very, very welcome. This is, of course, the board's first public meeting in over 2 years, and it is good to be back in business and being able to fully deliver on all our oversight duties for the benefit of policing and for the community. Having a democratically accountable police service, and with it, effective oversight, is essential for public confidence. In addition to the board's accountability duties, we also have a very important advocacy role to work with the Chief and the senior team to ensure the best possible policing service for all in our communities. Members share a collective desire to achieve this, and with the absence of the executive, we have the opportunity to show leadership in our work as we plan ahead. As we have discussed with you, Chief, there are particular challenges ahead for PSNI, including pressures on budgets, resourcing issues, and potentially issues arising for policing here from the EU exit. And indeed, we had a very extensive discussion around that in our private session this morning. There are also security-related issues that manifest on our streets in recent weeks through the bomb attack at the courthouse in Derry and in a paramilitary activity. Following the local policing consultation, we are also very aware of the changing demands from the public and the necessity to shape the service so that it meets future need and operational demands. But there's a lot of work to do, and I couldn't let this moment go without saying that one issue which focused our attention this week, and one which we really hadn't anticipated, was the Chief Constable's intention to retire. As a board, we had hoped that you, Chief, would take up the offer of an extension to your contract, and we are disappointed, but we respect your decision, and we thank you for your very loyal, dedicated service and leadership to the PSNI over the last few years. I would also like to thank you for your advocacy for the importance of police accountability through the work of the board, and for your work and the support of your team in continuing that engagement with the board over the last 2 years. Because although we didn't have a meeting in public, we definitely did have some public meetings, and those of you who attended know that the police attended all of those and indeed did presentations, and we're very grateful for that. But needless to say, the appointment of your replacement and bringing permanency to positions within your senior executive team is #1 priority for this board. It will require some sequencing, and as previously discussed with you, the board will wish to discuss with the new Chief Constable the structure and the size of the service executive team, because there are also, as we know, a number of vacancies on the staff side of the house. The board has agreed that your appointment should take immediate priority with completion by June, and the other positions that are currently filled on a temporary basis will be scheduled into that. And the board met yesterday to start to look at a timetable for all of that. But there are a number of months to go before you leave, and as we discussed in the private session earlier, there are some very significant issues ahead that we all need to work on together. We're very grateful for the report, which again we give a lot of time to this morning, and we have had questions on that. So I'm going to hand over to you to ask for some introductory comments, and I know that there was a number of operational issues in the last couple of days which you'll want to reference. So handing over you then, Chief, so that you can maybe give us an insight into the key elements of your report.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the report is being made public in around now, so I don't plan on using time now, unless you want me to go through any of the detail of that, and I know that members have a range of questions for us. So, other than to reiterate your comments about it's good that the board is back and functioning, we have a number of things that only a board can do for us, including senior appointments. Thank you for the kind words about my announcement recently to retire. That was a difficult decision to take. I think it's the right one for me and for my family and for policing. But it has been a tremendous 5 years, and there's still 5 months to go. So please be assured of the continued energy and commitment right through to the last day. I think the reconstituting of the board gives us an opportunity once again to grow confidence in policing and to have policing shaped by the community through the board members. We're up for that, we encourage it, and actually that accountability I think that the board brings, and our willingness to answer questions and operate with transparency is enabled through a properly functioning board. And over the last 2 years we have felt devoid of that, even though there are some uncomfortable moments in this room in the accountability arrangements. We do understand as a team that that is for the good of the community and good of confidence in policing. Only other thing for me to say at this point, Chair, is to pass on my appreciation to you, the Vice Chair and the Chief Executive. We wanted, as a senior police leadership team, to make ourselves accountable, even though the board was not formally constituted due to the political stalemate. So you are right to say that every meeting was accepted, and we engaged with you as Chair, Vice Chair and Chief Executive, and indeed with other independent members in the same way as if the board was constituted, and hopefully that's an indication to you and to the members, to the communities indeed, of our commitment to accountability, and we do appreciate the advocacy aspect that comes from the board as well. There's a number of very significant challenges. I don't plan on going through them. I'm working on the assumption that they will come out through the discussion and through the questions. So to make best use of our time, Chair, if you're agreeable, I'll hand back to you to facilitate some questions.
Thank you very much. We will move straight to the questions, so I'm going to ask Linda Dillon to lead us on the first question, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just given that this is sexual violence and awareness week, do the PSNI accept the Dillon report recommendations, and does their response to the consultation reflect this?
Well, we welcome the work done by Sir John Dillon. We have had very senior involvement from the police service into that, both sitting as part of his advisory group, and indeed I know that even in the last week or so there has been proofreading going on of the report. I'll hand over to Barbara Gray, the Assistant Chief Constable for Crime Operations, to give our organisational position on the report and its current status.
Thank you for that. I think it is very timely to have such a question when it is Sexual Crime Awareness Week, and we all know that sexual violence is an act that just has a profound impact on all victims. We welcome the Dillon report. We have submitted our reply to his initial report and recommendations that have been made. I think we've engaged very positively with Sir John Dillon throughout this process. Indeed, our Head of Public Protection Branch, who's Detective Chief Superintendent Paula Hilton, has sat on the advisory board for that, and we shall be having a meeting next week to discuss some of the recommendations that have been put forward and to shape a way forward. We have already started to improve some of our work and processes and to ensure that the recommendations are already being addressed.
Thank you for your response. I'm just wondering, do you have any detail in terms of, do you accept those recommendations? Obviously you said that Paula Hilton was on the advisory group, so there was a good opportunity there for the PSNI to have their input. Therefore, Sir John Dillon will already have taken on board a lot of the concerns of the PSNI, I would assume. So he would have made his recommendation based on having taken those concerns on board.
Well, the Dillon report is not yet published. The Dillon report was commissioned by the Criminal Justice Board, of which I sit. I was an advocate for this report, and I wanted somebody of Sir John Dillon's standing to be doing it. And through the offices of the Lord Chief Justice, he was able to facilitate that. So our investment in this, our interest in it, is unquestioned as far as I'm concerned. But you know, you're asking a question about a report that has not yet been published. It's going through. I understand that tomorrow actually is the deadline for responses on factual accuracy and clarification points back to Sir John Dillon. So at the moment it's impossible for me on behalf of the organisation to give a sweeping statement that I accept all findings and all recommendations. I simply can't do that. Personally, I haven't read them. I will before we take an organisational position. I'm very happy to leave it with Barbara and Paula, who are our professional leads in this for now, but we will, as a senior team, sit down, as we do with all of these reports that come out, and work out our organisational position in relation to them. We don't just have a default position that we accept everything that people write about us or every recommendation they make, and we also need to deal as well with managing expectations, because there may well be, and I don't know this yet, but there may well be recommendations that in the ideal world we would agree with, but actually as we have to spread our ever-reducing pool of resources more widely, it may be that it's not feasible, even though it would be aspirational. We want to be honest. We don't want to build expectations up by saying we, without reservation and unequivocally, accept all of Sir John Dillon's findings and recommendations. When, first of all, as a team, we haven't considered them yet, and secondly, the report hasn't even been published. But please don't take that as any reservation. Sir John Dillon was suggested by the Lord Chief Justice at our request for somebody of that prominence and authority to look at this right across the criminal justice system, and we welcome his appointment. We welcome the report. To ask if before I read it I accept every jot and tittle of it, I don't think is realistic.
Dolores Kelly?
Thank you, Chair. My question is in two parts. Chief Constable, in relation to domestic violence protection orders, which were tabled by myself actually in Parliament, about the practicalities in relation to the implementation of them. There has been a delay of almost 4 years. I just wonder why that has been, and I realise it's across the criminal justice system. And the second part is more broadly around the protection of vulnerable people. And I wonder, could we get an update on the investigation both into the Buckamore Abbey and indeed the Dunmurry Care Home in terms of wider protection of vulnerable people?
Chair, well done, Dolores, because there's been 5 questions built into that one. We'll do our best. In relation to domestic violence protection orders and other provisions actually to tackle domestic abuse, I think it's well known that, at least as I understand it, it's sitting in the stack for a Justice Minister. We don't have one. That's nothing to do with policing, sadly. So I understand as well that that has been through the entire legislative process and was waiting for the final few days in the Assembly, and we don't have an Assembly or a Minister to take it forward. But please, the more tools that we can get in the box to tackle domestic abuse, especially into coercive behaviour and psychological abuse and things that are difficult to prove, but actually we know that they're very prevalent within our society. We want to care for those victims, support them, and use whatever criminal justice tools we can. So we welcome the legislation, but the lack of going forward is beyond our control. I think I'll probably leave for Barbara to comment on the other issues and the specific cases that you referred to.
Can I just clarify, Muckamore?
Yes, Buckamore Abbey, and there was also, I think, some preliminary work by the police to whether or not there were questions to be answered in terms of interagency action around vulnerable older people in care homes.
Thank you. Well, if I can update firstly, Chair, please, on Muckamore Abbey. What we do have to be mindful of is that there is an ongoing investigation, and we can't prejudice that investigation by any means. But what we are dealing with within Muckamore Abbey are people from our society who are undoubtedly the most vulnerable people within our society. An investigative team has been established to take forward the investigative lines that are in place. There are thousands upon thousands of hours of CCTV and video footage to be viewed, and that is ongoing. That evidence gathering process shall continue at pace, and we will continue to work really closely with the Health Trust and through joint protocols around how that is approached. As I said, we have to respect the ongoing investigation that is in place. We are working closely with other partners, which includes taking advice from the National Crime Agency, who have a need for vulnerability in investigations of this type and across the broader GB prospect. So it's fair to say that as it is making progress, we still have quite a way to go. But it's just again to highlight the impact on families who are representing those most vulnerable people who don't have a voice for themselves. So for us to address those witnesses and be able to gather that evidence and the suitable evidence is obviously a very sensitive issue, and how we manage that. There is an absence of adult safeguarding legislation within Northern Ireland, although we take advice from the National Crime Agency and other partners in other police services. our legislation is not comparable to what there is in England and Wales, and I do believe that is a gap for us in Northern Ireland.
Colm?
Chair, thank you. You touched a little bit on resourcing issues and so forth, and in relation specifically to children at risk of sexual exploitation, I'm not just talking about the Dillon report, but generally speaking, what are the PSNI doing about tackling that, and that includes training of officers and working with other agencies?
Well, three years ago, as a number of UK-wide reports were being published in relation to vulnerability and child sexual exploitation in particular, we reviewed our responsiveness to the full gamut of public protection issues, including child abuse and child sexual exploitation, and we decided to make it a more corporate response. We created, instead of having small teams across each district, we still have people co-located with district colleagues, but we have brought it in under Detective Chief Superintendent. In fact, the first Detective Chief Superintendent was George Clark, who's sat at the table from me here, and currently Paula Hillman has that role. So there's a branch that has brought together all the various strands of public protection. The public protection agenda is one that at a strategic level, whilst our resourcing is shrinking, and we've had £150 million of cuts during my tenure as Chief Constable. Despite the downward trajectory of our budgets, our resourcing, public protection is one of 4 areas that we want to grow the capability in, whilst realising that we have to reduce the overall cost of policing according to the budget that we're given. So there are training initiatives. There is the professionalisation through bringing these units together, at least in an organisational structural term, and in addition to that, through priority-based resourcing, we have significantly increased the staffing level into all strands of public protection. So public protection is a more generic term that deals with rape crimes, serious sexual offences, domestic abuse, child abuse, and not just the investigative side, but the whole safeguarding and the partnership element. So, for example, our public protection units are aligned at one level to the local police districts, because everything happens in a local area, but we also have them aligned and partnered with the health trust areas, so that there's a lead on public protection issues across each health trust area, and partners know who their go-to person is. Barbara, is there anything to add to that?
I think it's just worthy of note that there will, in coming weeks, be 27 more officers move into the area of public protection, and particularly concentrating on the CSE side. I think the Chief has already shown this is a complex area. It covers online abuse, cyber-enabled crimes that we have. It can involve drugs, it can involve even the human trafficking side. So it is multifaceted and multi-layered, but certainly a priority for us as an organisation.
Thank you very much for that. We'll move to another topic now, and we'll ask Joanne to lead on that, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Chief Constable, my question is in the context of an escalation in criminal activity from paramilitary gangs, particularly in London, Derry, with the bomb, the hoaxes, the shootings and the hijackings, and then in my own constituency with the abhorrent and vicious murder of Ian O'Gulp by members of East Belfast GBA. Firstly, I'd like to publicly express my heartfelt sympathies to Vera, Tony and Ryan at this immensely difficult time. I don't intend to ask specifics about the case in this meeting, but PSNL will be well aware the communities are sick of these bully boys throwing their weight about and behaving not only like they are above the law, but that they are the law. And so my question is twofold and relates to the Paramilitary Crime Taskforce. In light of recent claims and activity by this latest version of the IRA, does the PCTF intend to review and or add to the list of groups on which it currently focuses? And secondly, and more generally, is the Paramilitary Crime Taskforce going to review and adapt its activity to capitalise on this current mood of public revulsion and bring down all these criminal gangs and all their criminal bosses faster and for good?
Well, certainly I'd like to agree with your analysis of the scourge that paramilitarism is in our communities. The Paramilitary Crime Taskforce does provide a very important capability for us in partnership with HMRC and National Crime Agency colleagues. And I'll ask Barbara in a moment to talk about some of that activity and the range of it. I would like to point out, though, that in addition to the Paramilitary Crime Task Force, which is actually our response to some of the recommendations in the Fresh Start Agreement. Now, we got that agreement between the parties, I think, in December or January, December 15 or maybe January 16. So it's quite old now. There is the executive, before it folded, did create a very good Fresh Start action plan. And of course, some actions in that fell solely to policing. Some of it was in partnership with the policing board around how we engage with so-called community leaders by night and paramilitary, community leaders by day, paramilitary leaders by night. And that is part of the complexity of policing and dealing with all the post-conflict issues. But despite there being difficulties with that, we will not tolerate and we will not give any legitimacy to paramilitary groups. They're unlawful, they're prescribed under the Terrorism Act. We want to unashamedly make life as difficult for people involved in paramilitary activity. It's a scourge in our communities, and Barbara will speak to the Paramilitary Crime Task Force, but Terrorism Investigations Unit, even neighbourhood policing teams in East Belfast are doing their part around sometimes controversial tactics like stop and search and enforcement, and this is where there's a whole blurred area stretching right into things like licensing of door staff, security companies. Not all of them now, some of them are conducted very well in a very lawful and helpful manner, but some of them are also quasi-legal organised crime gangs. So we have a picture of this. We're doing our best to dismantle it. We're grateful for the Fresh Start funding that has enabled us to have this bespoke team focused on dismantling paramilitary groups. But in addition to that, I wouldn't like it to appear that it's only because of that we're starting to take any action against paramilitary groups. This has been an objective for us organisationally and for some of us personally over a long number of years. But Barbara may have some more detail around the Paramilitary Crime Task Force and indeed the East Belfast and London now.
Thank you. And I think it's important to say from the outset as well that the Paramilitary Crime Task Force focus on those groupings who are defined and deemed as non-national security. So when you're asking about the remit of the Paramilitary Crime Task Force, it does not include the activities of the new IRA, who we believe have been responsible for the attack outside the courthouse in Derry, Londonderry on the 19th of January. As regards overall the work of the Paramilitary Crime Task Force, we are absolutely determined to play our role in bringing paramilitaries before the courts to protect the public, to prevent crime and to detect offences. So far, since the setup of the Paramilitary Crime Task Force and the figures as they are of today, there have been 408 searches, there have been 165 arrests, 131 disposals from that, and 16 convictions. And many of those disposals, as we say, are still within the court system. We work closely, the Chief is referred to, we work closely with HMRC, we work closely with the National Crime Agency to ensure that we can have the most holistic investigative capability to tackle paramilitary groupings within Northern Ireland. As regards the murder of Ian Ogle was brutal, callous murder. The investigation has been continuing at pace, and to date we have 14 arrests and there have been 19 searches in relation to that murder. We've absolutely no doubt that key suspects include people who have been associates with East Belfast UVF or members of East Belfast UVF. But this is a fast-moving investigation. It continues at pace. There's another arrest this morning, and we are confident that we will come to a place we will have people before the courts charged with this murder.
Sure. Darren?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it's just appropriate to come in the back of
Yes.
my colleague's question, because she touched on the Northwest and London, Darren. I wanted to just get a bit of clarity. Firstly, I just want to put on record my thanks and commend the work of the PSNI carrying out their operations. I think the community are hugely thankful that nobody lost their life or nobody was seriously injured, so we want to put on record our thanks. Chief Constable, in your report, you stated that the bomb, the hijackings and the security alert reflect the determination of some of these small groupings, and you allude to the new IRA, and again that was mentioned by your colleague. Can you be clear as to which grouping was responsible? Because I know, certainly from public comments from a number of these groupings, that there have been more than one claim of responsibility. So I think it's important that we get clarity as to who actually was responsible.
We believe it was the new IRA that were responsible for the bombing and also orchestrated the violence and disruption and hijackings that happened within the days afterwards. That's our assessment.
Dolores? Sure, just in relation to paramilitary activity in general and the East Belfast UVF in particular, indeed Mid-Antrim as well, or South Antrim, because it has been raised at previous policing boards, in terms of the resources, 20 years on, the communities don't feel really that there is a grasp, a strong enough grasp by police and other agencies in tackling this. So what are the gaps in terms of resourcing around that? Are the gaps in legislation, for example, in terms of some of the other types of disposals that might be at your disposal? And there's also a murder in urine. I just wonder if the SEC could comment on that investigation.
We could sit here and bounce statistics and figures and cash seizures and arrests and prison sentences back and forth because we would say that operating within the rule of law, we have had significant impact on dismantling both organised crime groups, these paramilitary organisations that are really just organised crime groups under the flag of convenience of something, I'm not saying it was ever legitimate or justified, by the way, but a lot of these people, when the conflict came to a much reduced scale, had no real reason to be, so they're just involved in sheer criminality, like the UDF and UDA and so on. And so, we would say that we have had significant success, but there are other elements that we still need to fix. So, one of the keys to dismantling paramilitary groups is to go after their funding and their money and so on. There are some additional provisions like unexplained wealth orders, for example, and so on, that would be helpful to us as an executive could bring. But we don't want to hide behind that as some sort of an excuse. We can provide the board with a full briefing around Paramilitary Crime Taskforce, and I think during the time that the board was in that non-constituted place, we did a number of visits with independent members, and one of which was to Grosvenor Road, where the Paramilitary Crime Taskforce sits our own people sitting alongside HMRC and NCA officers. So there's lots going on in that. There's always more to do. I appreciate and want to be mature about the state of public finances, but in my 4.5 years as Chief Constable, there's been £150 million taken out of the police budget, and I think we have worked as creatively and as innovatively as we can to continue to deliver a service, serving communities, safeguarding, reassuring, but doing the enforcement piece as well, as best we can in what are very difficult financial circumstances. Perhaps a full briefing and even a visit to Paramilitary Crime Taskforce would be helpful.
We'll move on. I'll come back to you. You're going to say something, right? Sorry, Barbara.
No, it was just in response to the Warren Point murder as well. I think it's useful to have a wider context as well, as we're talking about now two very specific cases. Overall, our serious crime branch currently have 50 active murder investigations and 42 other active investigations ongoing. Throughout that, I want the public to be reassured there have been and will continue to be many convictions for murder. And indeed, through the month of January, we saw a total of 6 life sentences handed down for different murders, which very sadly affected families, obviously really acutely. As regards the murder in Warren Point and the attempted murder of a young woman who thankfully appears to be on the road to recovery, it's a complex investigation. We are following lines of inquiry at this time. And I think it's important just to highlight that it's an opportunity to place a public appeal today as well, that if anyone has information that is relative to that incident or that murder or any others, to please come forward as well.
Thank you very much. Philip? McGuigan?
Thank you. Just in your report to the board, when you talk about Brexit, presenting it in the report, real challenges from a policing perspective. So I would like a wee bit more detail put on those words, and if you could give maybe detail of the challenges that are likely to come to policing the PSNI, crime detection, ability to prosecute criminals currently, and in any likely Brexit scenario.
Okay, I'll make one sort of strategic point about our response to EU exit, and then I'll hand over to Tim Mayers. Brexit, or EU exit, whatever way you want to label it, affects all of us every day actually, but Mark Hamilton and Tim Mayers are leading on significant aspects of it, and I think Tim is best placed to answer your question. Can I make one point on this? The issue of EU exit, the police are where we should be. We're in a completely apolitical space. We're not advocating for any particular solution, compromise, or anything else. We want to navigate our way through the politics, but we don't want to create an impression that we are part of that, because we're not. That said, our job is to provide policing assessment on options that are presented to us, and those assessments should be based on what the implications and consequences for policing and our communities are from a policing perspective. So there is a tendency, and some commentators have actually said this, that we are, advocating an anti-EU exit position or a Remain position. We're not, and we've said the same thing for 3 years in front of select committees and to journalists and so on. Whatever happens around EU exit will happen, and that's for the political space to come to some sort of agreement on. But we need to be responsible around making sure that we are equipped to handle the consequences and the implications of it. Down to the specifics of what some of those challenges are, I'll hand over to Tim and perhaps our response to them. Tim.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose in very simple terms, whilst we are working very hard to plan and prepare for EU exit, we have to acknowledge at the outset that many of the issues to which we're planning against remain within the political space and are still subject to negotiation. So often we're dealing with a degree of uncertainty. But the 5 key areas that currently we're planning in relation to can be broken down fairly simply. The first is the operational policing design, if you will, for the police service, with a particular focus on border communities. So as we start to understand eventually arrangements in Northern Ireland and how the border will be managed, it'll be up to the police service to fulfil our legislative obligations in that area. That is ensuring that we reassure and support communities who live along the border, and that we work really effectively with partners to do that. So that's one area. In that at the moment, DCC Mark Hamilton is leading an operational response to the potential of a no-deal scenario. So all government departments have to plan for no deal, and Mark is leading on that planning, and my team are supporting him on that. The second area is around counter-terrorism, safety and security, and that's working very much with Barbara Gray's world to ensure that we continue to be able to share intelligence and information with partners effectively to meet serious terrorism threat across Europe, and particularly from Ireland into the UK at the land border point. The third area overall, Chief Constable and other partners in the south. This is a key relationship for us, and we welcome the fact that we have excellent working relationships within Cards Buchanan. So it is working consistently to ensure that we maintain and actually enhance those relationships for the purposes of protecting communities, both north and south, and particularly border communities. There is an area around our powers and policies, and that is particularly focusing on what's known as the justice and home affairs measures that are provided through our membership of our current membership of the European Union. So some of the better known ones will include the European arrest warrant and the ability to form joint investigation teams to investigate trans-European crime. So the police service are working very, very hard with our partners in the Department of Justice and the Home Office to ensure that we identify how we maintain as many of those powers as possible. And we are also involved in the International Crime Coordination Centre, which has been set up in London to provide a UK policing response to the challenges that are faced in that. There's an awful lot of work and technicality that goes into that, and we'd be very happy to provide a further briefing on that detail. And finally then, Mark McNaughton is leading on the organisational preparedness of the police service. So as with government agencies, businesses have also been asked to plan for the impact of EU exit, and the police service is ultimately a very large business. So we have to make sure that commercially we're in a place where we understand potential impacts to contracts, to supply chains, and to other issues around that, and Mark's leading on that piece of work. So it's a very high level summary, Chair, of the risks that we see potentially in the work that we're undertaking to mitigate those risks.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just maybe ask the Chief Constable to comment if he would? First of all, I want to acknowledge and accept and respect the statement he made about the neutrality of the police in relation to Brexit. But there's a sort of a fundamental managerial organisational issue for me, and it is this of opportunity cost. You know, anytime we look across the whole landscape of policing, the complexity, the range of things that need to be addressed. And I've been reassured today, hugely so, by the work that's ongoing on Brexit. But there is a cost to that work. And just to get a sense from you, Chief Constable, of what does that mean in terms of the routine core business of the PSO?
Well, it is significant. It does impact each of us. So, for example, on Monday, as a result of a request that arrived at the office on Sunday evening, my personal diary was completely turned around, and Tim and I ended up doing 2 meetings of 2.5 hours each on this issue of EU exit. And at the same time, you know, I'm having to cut short a meeting with the Garda Commissioner, for example, dealing with not just EU exit issues, but other cross-border business-as-usual issues. So it is significant. There was a very small amount of money that came from Treasury for EU preparedness. Tim will probably have all the figures in his head, but it basically allowed us to finance about 3 posts, or maybe 4, for the purposes of almost like a project plan. Well, it's now grown into a sub-branch within Tim's department, and in the operational end of the business, district policing, where we're wanting to re-profile as much in the critical neighbourhoods and show the visibility piece. As the complexity of change of policing increases, what tends to happen is there's more specialists, fewer generalists, and we've seen that pattern, and I tried to explain that to the board. In the midst of doing that, another factor, another distraction almost, is EU Brexit, because we would be irresponsible not to plan on a number of sensible assumptions and working assumptions, really. So that reaches far into the sort of criminal justice world, where we want to do a lot of criminal justice reform, and we're still doing that, but not at the pace that we would want, and also into the operational service delivery. So, Tim, you probably have a better overview of exact numbers and budgets and so on.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, I suppose that when we talk about opportunity costs, I certainly have seen the change from this being a discrete project, which essentially was run by a very, very small team, to a position where you now have 2 chief officers spending a significant amount of our time on this, on the operational project side, and then the Chief Constable and Deputy Chief Constable on top of that. to a position now where I would say all of us, as members of the Service Executive team, have a requirement to understand the issues around EU exit and dedicate a lot of time to that. And there's a number of reasons for that. Number one is, the issues and the elements that are at discussion and that negotiation have the potential to fundamentally change the nature of how we do our business, and it is critical that we're prepared for that. So I would reassure you that I'm confident that what we are investing in that is very, very necessary. And secondly, I think that the investment that we are making at this time is necessary to ensure that we don't incur nuggetry cost as a result of failures at a later stage. So this is essentially invest to save to make sure that we're prepared. There was an allocation by Treasury of money for EU preparedness. That was then divided up regionally. Northern Ireland corporately received £14 million of a £1.5 billion budget. The Department of Justice was able to secure for the police service £350,000 for this year. That money was used to fund a small team. As a result of really good work with the Department of Justice and support from the Department of Finance, we have incurred additional costs in year, but we've been able to cover those with easements. So we have benefited from funding. And as you're aware, then the work of that small team was actually to prepare a business case which Treasury considered and have awarded us additional funding for next financial year, for one financial year only. That allows us to uplift our operational resource next year, but also does allow us to fund a slightly larger project team to continue the work and working with stakeholders around that. So I think we can look at it as a diversion or other factors, but it is a reality and it is here, and I therefore think it's incumbent on us to plan effectively to ensure that we're prepared and that we continue to protect our relationships with the community, and we're keen to continue that work with the policing board to make sure that we do that through what's a very uncertain period of time.
Thank you, Chair. As we mentioned already, we've been given some oversight of the police preparation for Brexit, and we're grateful for that. But to get down some of the detail and in relation to those perhaps who are most at risk, can I ask the Chief Constable what additional actions have the PSNI taken with regard to addressing the increased levels of hostility or hate crime directed at EEA nationals as a result of Brexit?
Well, I'm going to ask Mark to deal with this, because not only is it responsibility for our response to hate crime within this jurisdiction, he's also the UK lead on behalf of all of the policing organisations. So, do you want to just give him?
Yes, so I answered for this in 2016 when we had the UK spike in hate crime, a lot of which was focused upon other EU nationals, although which wasn't replicated in a spike in hate crime here in Northern Ireland at that time. So my company chair, there's two strands we're running on this. So as Tim pointed out, I'm responsible for the operational preparedness of the police service in Northern Ireland for the EU exit under an operation called Cookhouse. One of the strands of that is hate crime. The hate crime lead for that is the Chief Superintendent, and it's her role in that strand to engage with communities and preparedness both inside the police service and outside to deal with any potential confidence issues around hate crime, but also then any potential spike in the police response to that. On the national level, I've instituted a goal group which draws together all the hate crime coordinators from the police services around the UK. Also draws together the Home Office and MCHLG and other interested parties, the National Hate Crime Independent Advisory Group. And through that group, I'll be coordinating and overseeing not necessarily the work of police services, that's not my role. Each Chief Constable is autonomous in terms of what they do, but the national response to these issues and the national response to community confidence. There's been no additional resources provided to me to do any of this work. You asked about our opportunity costs. This is additional work that we contribute as a command team to UK policing as part of our national portfolios. And Chief Superintendent Dillon, who's leading for us locally, this is additional work that she has as a senior officer related to her day job.
Thank you very much. We'll move to Mervyn Storey now.
Chief Constable, you and your colleagues and senior officers are very welcome, and come out at the outset on behalf of my party colleagues, concur with the comments made by the Chair in relation to your announcement to retire, and we wish you well. As a newly constituted board, I trust that today makes an important contribution to not only holding the police to account, but also in the support of law and order and your officers, and also gives confidence to the people of Northern Ireland that progress can be made in very difficult and challenging political environment. I want to bring you back to the Christmas drink driving campaign referred to in your report. We have unfortunately in that report a 10% reduction in arrests. And given that over a 4-year period previously, 2013 through to 17, we had a staggering 21,660 drivers who were disqualified from driving in Northern Ireland, and 10,000 of those for drink and drug offences. What assurances can you give the public today that we won't only have a focus on this very serious issue at the Christmas season, but throughout the year, so that we can ensure that our roads are safe? Ever remember that behind all these statistics, there are families who are grieving and families who have lost loved ones. And finally, can you maybe have some comment in relation to whether or not the PSNI is part of the National Dashcam Safety Portal, which is an issue of importance to many cyclists, and we've seen some comment in recent days at National in relation to that issue.
Thank you, Mervyn, and thank you for your kind comments on support. You're right to say that behind all of those statistics are families that have been devastated as a result of lives lost, or indeed life-changing injuries in some cases caused on our road, and often down to excessive speed, inattention, and drink and drugs. So Alan Todd leads for us in this, and I'll ask him to address the substantive issues of your question.
Thanks, Chief, and thanks, Mervyn. Yes, 322 arrests in the Christmas campaign for 2018, just into 19. That's 322 people who will be facing the courts in the coming weeks and absolutely facing the loss of their driving licence for at least the next 12 months. And I suppose that's a contribution to making the road safer, because those people that choose to get in behind the wheel of a motor vehicle put themselves and other members of the public at risk by doing so. But it is one of the top 4 causative factors of serious road traffic collisions in Northern Ireland. Speed and inattention being the other 2. And the 4th one we always add into that are people failing to wear seatbelts, because if you don't wear a seatbelt when you are in a collision, then your chances of injury are so much higher. So those are our principal areas of focus with our partners in Northern Ireland Road Safety Partnership, as well as other agencies who work in this field as well. You asked the question, do we have an ongoing commitment to that outside the Christmas period? We absolutely do. And I take no pride in saying that on average, on any month in Northern Ireland, we get an average of 200 plus people arrested for drink driving alone, which takes generally in any given year over 3,000 people detected for drinking and driving. And that's a stain on society, and it's a significant risk to people trying to use the roads safely. But neither can it be seen in isolation. We're also seeing somewhere in the region of 38,000 people detected for speeding every year, and other thousands of people have been detected driving carelessly, driving whilst using a mobile phone. So the standards of people's behaviour on the roads is not good, and that's merely been reflected in the amount of detections the Police Service and the Northern Ireland Road Safety Partnership have made. But the message from here today is, yes, we focus on it on a monthly basis. People need to understand, if you're detected driving a motor vehicle and the police officer has any suspicion that you've been drinking, you will be breath tested. If you're involved in a collision whether you've been drinking or not, you will be breath tested. Detected committing any offence whilst on a motor vehicle, the chances are you'll be breath tested. People need to understand that, and it's that determination on our side to use all the powers available to us to maximise the number of tests that should act as a deterrent. But the thing that should act as a deterrent, people who's going to take a chance and think they can get away with it. I would ask them to reflect on the 322 people who took that chance over Christmas and didn't get away with it, and those 200 plus people who every month take the chance and don't get away with it. Sorry, dash cams. Yes, I think that's a significant opportunity both for motor vehicle, for actually all road users, and not only are they now becoming quite common in motor vehicles, but also cyclists are starting to fit them to either the front or back or both of their bicycles as well. because it's really good, strong evidence about poor driving on the roads. There are a number of challenges as to how you safely bring that amount of video footage into an organisation's IT network, but we are working alongside national colleagues and information security experts to make sure that we are involved in the national work, that we are shaping ourselves towards being able to do that in the future, and we look to use that as another tool in the road safety moving forward.
Thank you very much. Brice Dickson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chief, I wanted to take you back to last summer when, in the wake of the film No Stone Unturned into the Loughlin Island murders in 1994, there was an alleged theft of a document from the Police Ombudsman's Office. And I think I'm right in saying you asked the Durham Police to investigate that matter. And it seems to have led then to the arrest of Trevor Burney and Mary McCaffrey. I'm wondering, could you, I know there's litigation in this and I don't want to trespass into the issues that are going to be discussed in the litigation, but could you give the board information as to which aspects of the searches that took place in connection with this issue and the arrests, which aspects of all those operations were the responsibility of the PSNI and which, if any, were the responsibility of the Durham Police? And if they were the PSNI's responsibility, why were the searches conducted in the, it seems, rather intense way that they were in terms of the numbers of police officers involved?
Well, you rightly point out that there are proceedings still live in this case, and both Durham Police and ourselves understand and respect the position that the two journalists have taken in relation to judicially challenging or seeking clarification on the lawfulness of the actions of Durham Police. So that does influence or impact how much we can say. We don't want to do anything that would be sub judice or disrespectful to the court. That's the first point. The second point is that in the middle of this sort of public dispute and court proceedings, we should remember and not lose sight of the fact that Loughlin Island was a horrible massacre, a barbaric atrocity, had devastating impacts on the lives of many families and indeed people who actually lost their lives. So we need to go back, because there's been a lot of public commentary about this, about, were we overzealous? There's been public commentary that we didn't have a statement of complaint from the Ombudsman. So one of the benefits of getting a policing board back is that it gives me a platform to explain our actions and to be held to account in this public way. So the Office of the Police Ombudsman for Northern Ireland did report the theft of their material to us, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, on the 4th of October 2017. This was immediately after they identified the fact that secret documents created by them had featured in the documentary film, and they got the benefit of seeing the film a while before it went public. Before it was publicly released. So this criminal investigation does have a definite starting point. And the stimulus for us doing anything about this was the report that was made to us by the Police Ombudsman. And once that happened, we had a responsibility, an obligation actually, under Section 32 of the Police Act, to investigate this. Now, if people want to dance at the head of a pin about whether it was a formal criminal complaint or not, it matters not. Our responsibility under the Police Act is where we have reasonable cause to believe that offence is being committed, that we have responsibility to investigate that. And so all we're doing is what the same legislation that created the policing board obliges us to do, that when something of a criminal nature is reported. Now, that said, the initial report by the Police Ombudsman's staff was subsequently followed up by a written statement of complaint by a member of the senior management team within the Ombudsman's office. So I want to burst the myth out there that there was no statement of complaint. Number one, we didn't need a statement of complaint. We had a report of what was quite a serious offence in terms of the theft of the documents and all of the consequences that flow from that in relation to people's privacy and indeed their security and their safety. So whether we had a statement of complaint or not, we had a positive obligation to investigate. But we did have a statement of complaint. I have read it myself. On listening to public commentary about this, I did involve myself in this investigation, and I said, is there a statement of complaint? Yes, came the answer. I said, I want to read it. Go and get it for me. And I did that. So unequivocally, there is a statement of complaint. Now, clearly, we realised what we were dealing with in terms of the controversial nature of it. We were going to be investigating an important and valued element of our accountability infrastructure. So on the basis of that, I went to the National Police Chief's Council Crime Investigations Lead, who is the Chief Constable of Durham, Mike Barton, and I said, could you identify for me a suitably equipped and qualified Chief Constable or Deputy Chief Constable to take this investigation forward from an oversight point of view, and also that that person has access to at least the senior leadership team of senior investigating officers and interview advisors and so on, all the infrastructure that would come around doing the inquiry. So the national lead on this, after making some inquiries, decided that he would take it on himself, and that's how it came to end up with Durham. Now, the accountability arrangements that Durham have, to me, in practice, are not dissimilar to the accountability arrangements that I have with you as a policing board. So I have given, and this is all based on legislation through the Police Act, they are operating all on the same basis as a mutual aid officer coming into this jurisdiction. I've given another Chief Constable full operational responsibility for the activity on that. I've made sure that he has been briefed on the localised sensitivities. This is always going to be controversial in any jurisdiction if we were going to knock doors and search and arrest journalists. I accept that that's not a comfortable place to be, but it's an obligation under law. So Mike Barton, as the Chief Officer responsible for this, has full operational independence, although I prefer to use the term operational responsibility, because just in the same way that you as a board don't tell me what to do operationally, you're very good at following up after the fact with what did you do, why did you do it, and proportionate, was it human rights compliant, and so on. Likewise, in the current arrangements, if we are about to do something that I know will be a news headline, I will, out of courtesy, in advance of our action, inform our Vice Chair of the Board, whichever I can get a hold of, and that's out of courtesy so that people are not taken by surprise hearing something. And sometimes these things are difficult and sensitive, and there's not a great deal you as a board can do about it knowing in advance. And actually, as my discipline authority, you don't want to be too involved in those decisions anyway, because you might have to sit over formal proceedings against us. I treat the relationship that I have with Durham Police in exactly the same way. So Barton will answer my questions and be fully answerable and accountable to me, because in statute I'm still the Chief Constable of PSNI and therefore ultimately accountable to you for this. But I can't ask for independence and then go directing another Chief Constable what to do. Either give over that autonomy and that responsibility, or you don't. And if I hadn't done that, I'd be sitting here today answering difficult questions about how on earth can you be independent? You're investigating the people charged with investigating you. So we've acted in good faith. We foresaw some of this controversy, and we believed that one way of mitigating that and maintaining public confidence around what was going to be a very difficult and requiring lots of sensitivity was to outsource it to another police service. So that's the story of how we got to this point. We value the judicial clarity, although the judicial review has had a perverse effect of slowing down the progress of the investigation. If that hadn't happened, by this stage we might have had a conclusion, or at least a report to the PPS. And just the only other thing I would say to reassure members and indeed the public is that we, as a police service, both Durham Police and PSNI, are aware of how this looks, and of the challenges and of the confidence issues attached to it. Every step of the way has been taken with independent senior counsel advice at a reassuringly high cost. It has had the benefit, where it's appropriate, of prosecutorial advice from the PPS. We're not hiding behind counsel or PPS, we're doing searches and making arrests, but what I'm saying is Durham Police have taken full cognizance of prosecutorial advice, other legal advice, and indeed have sought guidance from us at times about how they're going to do things, given the unique circumstances and the nuances of policing in this jurisdiction. I'm not sure what else we could do to try to play this with a straight bat. We have tried our best. We have empowered somebody else to do the investigation. We have held that person to account. We have engaged senior counsel, or he has engaged senior counsel, and we did the privilege of paying for it. All of that has happened in an attempt to just do the right thing, to act ethically, to act with integrity. And as I sit here today, I'm completely convinced that our actions have been lawful and proportionate and necessary. I can't just offload all the responsibility of this to Durham. I asked them to come in and do it, and ultimately I'm responsible, but I have put in place these measures to try to give confidence and show a degree of independence around the investigative actions.
Gerry Kelly, what do you want to say?
Chief Constable, that feels like a question we're really good on. You wanted somebody to ask that question. First of all, let me start off by saying I wish you all the best and your family all the best in the future. I do have, and I don't want to step until, because I know there's court procedures on as well, but I do think there are one or two points which are worth making. I mean, let me say, in the last couple of questions, that I think in the circumstances there are two investigative journalists. They have done a documentary. I think you acknowledge yourself, something like this, that it was of at least of benefit to the families who lost loved ones at the time, and certainly I've spoken to them since. But I have to say that, you know, and I understand it was something like 15 to 20 armed police officers went in to do the search. And in the circumstances of the overall thing, I would have to say that I don't think that that's proportionate, but that's my comment. I know the other doesn't feel. But I did want to ask, were there any British security services involved in this investigation?
No, absolutely not. Not before, during, or after.
Okay. And was it, I know the Ombudsman saw it from beforehand, but did any police officers see the film before it was released into the public?
No, I don't believe so. I could be wrong on that, but the only, the legacy department didn't see it. No, I'm pretty satisfied with it.
I'm just wondering why, since it was seen in the first instance, no action was taken until well after the film was out. My understanding is that I think the police officer did see it, but if we don't know, we don't know.
No, I think what might have happened is that the Ombudsman and senior people within the Ombudsman's office saw it, had a oh dear moment whenever they saw some of their own secret material shown on it, and came pretty quickly thereafter to tell us, in the form of Stephen Martin, who was the ACC crime at the time, the dilemma that they had. So that was the sequence of events.
So my last question is, correct me if I'm wrong here, that I understand one of the reasons for this investigation is the worry about, one of the reasons is about the public reputation of the PSNI themselves. And if that was one of the reasons to does that clash with the freedom of expression? Which is normally the right to freedom of expression to do that?
No, I mean, the decision to hold an investigation wasn't because there was a quality TV documentary that was uncomfortable for the police or the policing of that time to watch. What motivated the investigation was the apparently unlawful showing of secret documents and an indication from the film that secret documents that would have Article 2, that is the right to protection of life, implications were in hands that they should not be in. And they could only have come from one place, from the Ombudsman's office, so the Ombudsman did the responsible thing by having that reported to police, so that we could manage the Article 2 implications. But clearly we try to do that as best we can, but there was a criminal investigation, theft, Data Protection Act, other offences that were obvious. And, you know, I mean, we've got plenty to do. We weren't looking for some opportunity to discredit journalists or anybody else. In fact, journalists the other way we have a pretty good relationship with. You know, one of those journalists was in with Mark talking about hate crime response, even in the midst of all of this. So business is going on as usual. We have regard for those journalists. We respect the office of the police ombudsman. This is not a place where we wanted to be, either in terms of having to explain ourselves or indeed tie up resources. And whilst they're mostly Durham resources, we're paying for it. So there was no enthusiasm. There was a mature, responsible acceptance of our duty, our responsibility under the law, and that's what's got us to this point. Now, round the number of people, you know, deployed on a search or whatever, you know, doctors differ, patients die. I can't give over responsibility to another chief and then start quality assuring their search strategy. It has to be up to them, but knowing that it's up to them within an accountability framework. As I say, in practice, that sort of mirrors your relationship with me. Then I'm having similar conversations with senior people, including the Chief Constable of Durham.
Yes, if we could finish with this, George, thank you. But it is the case that the majority, I think maybe down to just one, was PSNI officers who were involved in the search. And is that also true of the interview, or the PSNI involved in the interview?
I'm not sure of the exact balance in numbers, but just to be very clear, you know, everybody's dealing with shortages, so no matter how much money you offer people, they still have difficulty translating that into people. So what we agree with Durham, and this is in the terms of reference, that complete direction and control decision making on the investigation was for the senior investigating officer and the Chief Constable from Durham. And I would give them, and this is perfectly normal, I would give them resources to fulfill their investigative lines of inquiry if required. So some of their investigative actions are in place. Other times when there needs to be a surge in resourcing, they will ask for a number of detectives or an analyst or whatever who will be deployed and will work under their direction control. And actually that Durham Police is a police service of about 800 officers, so there was something about getting a practical, pragmatic way of doing this. The officers who were engaged in some interviews were not the case, they were in strategy, they were simply there to fulfill the directions and the investigative actions set by the outside police organisation.
Dolores? Thank you, Chair. It's probably remiss not to have wished the Chief Constable well. There's a number of months to do all of that yet, and it's lovely. But in terms, you said about dancing on the head of the pin, and I would suggest that there will be continued dancing on the head of the pin from the police ombudsman as to the sequencing of events, and the ombudsman himself rebuts the fact that a complaint was lodged by his office and by him. But that aside, I don't know whether this would apply in this instance, but in terms of the community impact assessment, and we take the broad journalism spectrum as the community, was there such an impact assessment made? And these are alleged thefts, which could also be leaks, presumably, but you may not be able to answer that.
Well, you could leak information without leaving the document, so they had the document on the film, so please be assured we were not doing that programme looking for an opportunity to go and arrest journalists and investigate things. If we wanted that, if anything, to be used, even if uncomfortable, to be part of the healing or the filling in of the blanks for the families. We didn't cooperate with the programme because we had some concerns about it that I don't want to cross lines in terms of ongoing proceedings. But actually, the fact that it was being made for us was one of those uncomfortable positives that family are at least going to have their airing and that this will get national and international coverage. You know, I think we already answered the issue about whether there's a statement. Number one, we didn't need a statement. We had an obligation under the law to investigate this anyway. And number two, we did have a statement. It's signed by a member of the senior management team in the Ombudsman's office. I read it myself. So that might be disputed by people, but it's clear in my own mind, and I clearly wouldn't be saying that with such confidence if I wasn't more than 100% clear. Community impact assessment, in the same way that I would inform senior stakeholders, not seeking their concurrence or their permission, but the chair of the board might get a call from us, from one of the team here, before something difficult, controversial happens, so that nobody's doorstepped and hasn't had a chance to think of the line and all of that. And also, given the limitations of Durham Police in terms of their capacity and numbers, and their lack of knowledge of the operating environment. So community impact assessment was done, and they engaged with PSNI officers around the content of that, so that it was done in a meaningful way. And the confidence issues and the risk assessments attached to the community impact assessments were completed in relation to these arrests. And probably more importantly, important though that is, these arrests and searches, because it was journalistic material, required senior judicial authority. So the search warrants were signed by a judge of some seniority, and that was presented in court by counsel, and we had other counsel who were, Durham had other counsel that we got to pay for, who were giving advice on the legalities of all of this, and then there was another set of independent counsel that we had set up to make sure that only relevant material was reviewed by the police, and we actually had counsel who were looking through all the material to make sure that any collateral intrusion was minimised and that the police weren't sitting looking at journalistic material that was not connected to this particular case.
Thank you, Chair. Like others, I will have the opportunities at the later stage to properly thank the Chief Constable for his time and also wish him well for the future. There are two questions arising from this, Chair, further to concerns already expressed. My concerns today are going to concentrate on the process around this. First of all, I'm getting the questions briefly as I can. If there is work being carried out or communication being carried out by PSNI officers on behalf of Durham Police, then who manages that process and ultimately who takes management responsibility for that process? In addition to that, Chair, through you, and in a second question, can I ask, how can we as a board hold Durham Police to account? How can we play our accountability role in relation to actions carried out by Durham Police? Now, I know I'm addressing that, Chair, through you to the Chief Constable. I think it's something that this board will have to consider internally also, given that this board is responsible for the accountability of all policing within Northern Ireland.
Well, in relation to the first question about who manages the actions and so on, that is very clear cut. This is managed, led, directed by Durham Police, with the ultimate decision maker there being the Chief Constable Mike Barton. So there's no ambiguity around that whatsoever. He is accountable to me. He understands that. We have the terms of reference. He's not here just because I've invited him. He is here because I've invited him, but he comes with the authority of the Police Act to effectively operate in this jurisdiction as a seconded officer, and there's legal provision made for that to give it legal basis and legitimacy. In relation to your question about how can you hold Durham Police to account, the Chief Constable there, for his action, how is you support can do that? Well, I want to just, for the avoidance of doubt, make clear, I did not engage in outsourcing this at considerable cost to avoid accountability. Pretty much the opposite. I wanted to make sure that the public could have confidence by it not being the police service of Northern Ireland investigating their own accountability body, the police ombudsman. So there was no alternative motivation behind that. Ultimately, whilst I have given responsibility for this, and he's got hard to do it once I give it under legislation, I am responsible for all police activity that happens in this jurisdiction. So whether that's the NCA, whether it's Bedfordshire Police of Canova, or Police Scotland on Operation Cleana, or in relation to this investigation, Durham Police, you can ask me anything and you can hold me to account for it. And I'm not trying to offload any responsibility this afternoon to Chief Constable Barton. I'm telling you the arrangements that have put in place. I think they bring a degree of independence, a willingness to be responsive to the obvious concerns that would fall out of this case. That's why we outsourced it. And in addition to all of that, whilst not compelled in the Police Act, the Northern Ireland Police Act, to do so, Barton is prepared to come to this board and himself be answerable, with me sat beside him, for his actions. There's nobody on the police side who can deduct anything on this. I wish we didn't have to do it, but we are fulfilling our statutory responsibilities, our obligations, and we take no pleasure in it. It's uncomfortable. We have other and better things to do, frankly, but we couldn't pretend we didn't know what we knew. And whilst we didn't need a statement of complaint, we have one.
Okay, well, we're well over time, but we have 2 years of work to catch up on. So I'm just going to allow the last question to Keith Buchanan.
Thank you, Chair. Hey, Chief, just a quick question regarding the recent ATM thefts, or cash machine thefts. Obviously with Moira, Antrim, Fintan, previous way back from years back west to Road, from that area. Obviously they create a massive impact on communities and businesses, but the question, two sort of points to this question, and I appreciate it's a live and ongoing investigation for some of those. Do you see or have any knowledge of any of those attempts or robberies are linked to terrorist organisations? And are you making good progress, and I don't want a simple yes answer to that, are you making progress in stopping that crime out? Because it seems to be spreading.
Is this smart or harder for this one? Well, we are making progress, and one or other, or both of my colleagues will try to fill in some detail for you around that. The link to a terrorist organisation, if it was, we wouldn't say so at this stage, or it's unlikely that we would say so unless there was an investigative or an operational reason for doing so, because we don't just make statements to feed the beast, as it were, in terms of these fine journalists stood in the corner of the room, but we do it for investigative and for operational reasons. So unless there was a reason for attributing it to some terrorist grouping, we would not be doing that. That said, these do have big impacts in local communities. They tend to be, they tend to be meted out in places where communities and people come together, shopping centres and so on, and it is something that we take seriously. Is there anything investigatively that we can say at this stage, Barbara, given that it's a live issue?
No, but we have lines of inquiry that we are following, and I think I can say at the moment that it is unlikely that there are terrorist connections to the lines of investigation that we have at the moment. but their lines of investigation will continue. I think it's really important if we can take the opportunity just to highlight that, you know, Chief, sort of like between Mark as SEC for district for uniform local policing and myself as SEC for crime operations at the moment, because this is very much a joint endeavour between both departments to ensure that we do bring forward the best lines of evidence and inquiry that we have within these crimes, and we fully recognise the devastation that these can have on communities. Today already there has been, and it has been set up for a number of days, a seminar with banks and with ATM companies to assist with crime prevention advice around that and about methodologies that they can use to help protect themselves in many respects as well. But we're very alive to the issue. And we are not at the peak that there was 10 years ago when it was a real kind of crime series that we were looking at. It isn't at that level yet, and we will do everything that we can to make sure it's not.
I'll just say that there were 2 arrests there in January for ATM robberies before Christmas and 2 charges.
Okay, well look, we need to leave it there because we have gone over time, although it's been well worth it, and it's good to be back and to get that kind of discussion. There'll be lots of discussion in the weeks ahead. But I thank my colleague from the board for their patience and the questions, and thank you for coming today and getting us all up and running again. Thank you.
Thank you.